Welcome to our horror games episode. Today I wanted to talk about horror-themed video games. In this video, I wanted to go over some of the challenges of the horror genre and cover some of the upcoming horror video games that are slated to release soon. The horror genre is fairly niche, and it shouldn't come as a surprise. It isn't exactly something a lot of people enjoy. To voluntarily sign up to being frightened. As works of fiction, the genre also has a particular challenge. Whatever it is that is horrifying about the work becomes lessened as we, the viewers, become more familiar with it over time. Additionally, in the case of video games, it requires the participants' active involvement, and that is a yet even finer filter. It would stand to reason that few people want to subject themselves to being frightened, even fewer when their interaction is required as part of the experience. And what about getting more familiar with the monsters or entities in the video games? To that, I want to share a quote from Stephen King's Danse Macabre. "Nothing is so frightening as what's behind the closed door." The audience holds its breath along with the protagonist as she or he, more often she, approaches that door. The protagonist throws it open and there is a 10-foot tall bug. The audience screams. But this particular scream has an oddly relieved sound to it. A bug 10 feet tall is pretty horrible, the audience thinks. But I can deal with a 10-foot tall bug. I was afraid it might be 100 feet tall. The artistic work of horror is almost always a disappointment. It is the classic no-win situation. You can scare people with the unknown for a long time, but sooner or later, as in poker, you have to turn your cards up. You have to open the door and show the audience what's behind it. Stephen King is speaking to a little rule known as the don't show the monster rule in writing horror. Showing the monster is when the audience begins to lose suspense, when we no longer are at the mercy of our imaginations as to what the horrors might be. It's become real, and that might be less horrible than our imaginations built them up to be. Like Mr. King said, a classic no-win situation. Many horror video games inevitably have you faced off with whatever the monster may be, and it loses the shock and suspense. The jump scare only works so many times, if more than once at all. And that's something that has always made this particular genre tough. The replayability is limited. Like hearing a joke for the 10th time, it just isn't gonna be as good as the first time around. That leads me to why I feel this genre has been particularly enjoyable. Horror and comedy have commonalities. Let's quote another famous author on this genre. If you enjoyed horror as a child or have a child that enjoys it, chances are you know who R.L. Stine is. He's the author of the well-known series Goosebumps.
They both give the same visceral reaction, comedy and horror. It gives this example a lot. But when you sneak up behind somebody, a baby or anybody, and you go, boo, what happens?
They scream, then laugh.
It's all connected.
It is.
Or I think you pointed out, too, if you listen, you stand next to a roller coaster, you hear the whole thing.
You're screaming and laughing at the same time.
Yeah. Also, there's a structural component that is similar, right?
Well, you know, the chapter endings in Goosebumps, there's like a cliffhanger at the end of every chapter. Those are punchlines. It's the same as writing a joke. You're just leading up to this big shock at the end of every chapter.
If you think about what makes comedy funny, it's the leap of logic that the viewer gets when being led by the comedian or the display you're witnessing. It's the unspoken part that you, the viewer, must make on your own, and that understanding is what makes the joke funny. And that same reason is why explaining jokes doesn't quite work and removes all the spark from the equation. There's similar elements in horror. It requires intelligence. It's your rationing, your primal instincts of survival that is required to have fear. If you cannot relate to the protagonist in a video game, your sense of fear will be diminished. So you heard it here. Horror and comedy are for the smart people. Now that we understand a little more about horror, let's get to looking ahead at what some upcoming horror games are in our near future. The Chant. You play as Jess, who has come to Glory Island and is seeking healing from a past traumatic event, but her peaceful weekend turns into a cosmic horror nightmare after a group chant opens a portal to a dimension known as the Gloom. It will involve puzzle solving, exploring, combat, and crafting tools, weapons, or traps. Mind, body, and spirit are important gauges that you as the player will need to manage to keep Jess alive and well. Dialogue choices, meditation, and resources found on the island will influence these different measures of health. The Dark Pictures Anthology, The Devil in Me. The fourth installment and Season 1 finale in the Dark Pictures Anthology features 5 playable protagonists and a multi-linear narrative influenced by player choice. You'll be joining a group of documentary filmmakers who all have been invited to a modern-day replica of serial killer H.H. Holmes' Murder Castle. As they film their latest episode, they begin to realize things are not quite as they seem, and that they are being watched and manipulated.
He's trying to scare us.
Tell us something. Shit!
Autopsy Simulator. The player takes the role of pathologist named Jack. During the autopsy of a mysterious woman, Jack finds inside her the engagement ring of his long-lost wife, Kate. When the action is in progress, other elements of the mystery are found. In order to reveal the truth, Jack has to fight a battle with the sinister forces and his own thoughts. If you've seen the autopsy of Jane Doe, you might know what to expect from this one.
It could be freezing to death. The condition of the head tells us it could have been a fatal accident. As you probably already guessed, we're going to need the scissors.
The Callisto Protocol. Third-person survival horror game that looks very similar to Dead Space, set on Jupiter's moon Callisto in the year 2320. The game challenges players to escape the maximum security Black Iron prison and uncover its terrifying secrets. A blend of horror, action, and immersive storytelling. Initially, the director Glenn Schofield had this game heavily influenced by his science fiction survival game concept Meteor Down, which was planned to be an entry in the universe of PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. However, it appears the settings have been changed and may not have as much of a connection as it was previously set to have with PUBG. Choo-Choo Charles, an oddly compelling horror action shooter that pits you against Charles, a bloodthirsty spider train. Adventure through the island to gather resources and upgrade your train in order to beat Charles. This game is simply described by the developers blood, gore, and people being eaten alive by a spider train. The Outlast Trials, an upcoming first-person psychological horror survival video game developed and published by Red Barrels. It is the third installment in the Outlast series, serving as a prequel to the first 2 games and features test subjects in a mysterious Cold War experiment. This time around, it seems you'll be able to fight back, unlike in the original 2 games where your only options were to run and hide.
Night vision device fully operational, sir.
Excellent.
Grab my hand!
Unholy, a game where the doors between your everyday reality and a dark, unholy world have been breached. Explore both worlds to find clues, solve puzzles, decide whether you infiltrate or fight brutal enemies. Driven by a deep, dark narrative storyline played over captivatingly dark quality visuals, use 4 different emotions: anger, fear, sadness, and desire to interact with the environment or to confuse, lure, or damage your opponents. Killer Clowns from Outer Space, the game. This asymmetrical multiplayer horror is based on the iconic 80s film of the same name. The game pits 3 clowns against 7 humans. Clowns win by capturing most or all of the human citizens of Crescent Cove, while humans win by either deactivating the clown's big top spaceship, escaping the map before the time runs out, or keeping the majority of the townsfolk alive for the entire round. The Last Case of Benedict Fox. Descend into a limbo of decaying memories as Benedict Fox, a self-proclaimed detective, bound to his demon companion. Use the unholy bond to explore the minds of the recently deceased in search of clues as you uncover the mysteries of a massive, decrepit mansion, the site to a young couple's grisly murder, and the disappearance of their child. Immerse yourself in a dark world of secret organizations, forbidden rituals, and cold-blooded crimes, an adventure brought to life through a Burton-esque art style.
Feed off of people's emotions.
It is good to see you, you old devil. In trouble again, I presume?
I feel Harry knows you better than you do yourself.
Aliens: Dark Descent. Lead your soldiers in real-time combat against iconic xenomorphs, rogue operatives from Weyland-Yutani Corporation, and a host of creatures new to the Alien franchise. The game takes place in 2198, partly, if not entirely, at Tantalus Base. It focuses on a squad of Marines carried by the Otaga, trekking through a now-destroyed spacecraft on the search for an offline relay. The squad is controlled as a single unit. Players must leverage the surrounding environment to their advantage to seal off checkpoints, unlock shortcuts, and create safe zones.
Retreat! Retreat! Willis! Open fire! Go! 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 Alvarez! Through that door! Hold that door, Sergeant! Son of a...
Layers of Fear. The definitely not confusingly titled game, not to be confused with the original Layers of Fear and Layers of Fear 2. Yes, this is the third one, but adding a 3 just wasn't fashionable. Described as a first-person psychedelic horror chronicle focused on tense exploration and immersive storytelling. The original game had the player taking control of a psychologically disturbed painter working on his magnus opus as he navigated a Victorian mansion, revealing secrets about his past. We'll have to wait for the release of this one to find out how it continues the story.
Now I see it.
I will never be like one of his paintings. But I can make the paintings be like me. Scarred, broken, hidden from the world, imprisoned in this house.
I know what must be done.
I want out.
Redfall. The game is set within the fictional island town of Redfall, Massachusetts. After a failed scientific experiment, a legion of vampires invaded and isolated the town from the outside world. Trapped inside Redfall, players choose among 4 survivors and slay their enemies, vampires and humans alike.
I know we're here. Look alive.
This one is mine.
Going up.
Ill. Not too much is known so far about Ill. It's an upcoming horror survival first-person shooter by Team Clout. The game seems to have a contemporary setting and features quite the gruesome and grotesque transformations of the human body, and the typical zombie-like trope of shambling horrors approaching the living to do only what we know these monsters do best. Routine, a first-person horror exploration game set on an abandoned moon base. Your job is to find enough data to uncover the truth behind the strange disappearances of everyone stationed on the lunar research station. There does seem to have some weapons available to stop the robotic enemies we see in the trailer, but it's safe to say that you're not the action hero in this one. You'll likely spend more time running than fighting, running much more. Hopefully, out of all these, we get some good new horror games to remember. On that note, folks, I want to thank you for making it to the end here. I hope you enjoyed, and please take a moment to click the like button, subscribe, the real subscribe, and feel free to reach out in the comments. Your feedback, ideas, suggestions, they're critical in helping me make a better experience for us here at Elitist Jerks.